What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Elevate Your Grind, brought to you by the Cannabis Lab. I am your host, Todd Rosales, and I'm happy to see you folks again. Thank you for tuning into the show. Thank you for your continued support. The best thing you can do for us is subscribe to this channel, like us, give us a like on LinkedIn or wherever you happen to find this content, folks. All things C Lab, we have our regular scheduled events in Orlando, Tampa, Miami. The Fort Lauderdale event will be in the Boca Raton American Social this month. Remember, that is the in-person C-Lab events. Check those out. Third Thursday of every month, August 17th on this month. If you want to check those out, you can go to joinclab.com. For those of you that are not in lovely South Florida, it's jealous of you because it's probably not over 100 degrees where you live. But B, we do have a digital membership that gives you access to all of our digital community, especially our expert webinars and some exclusive content. You can check that out. I think it's $15 a month. You can check that out at joinclab.com as well. Of course, if you don't have the time to sit down and finish this interview and you want to catch it later, you can always check it out on YouTube, youtube.com/elevateyourgrind, or anywhere that you download your podcast, especially if you don't want to stare at my face while you listen to my voice. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, and all the other podcast platforms where you can download us. All right. My guest today promises me that he's going to turn my opinion around on the doom and gloom of the cannabis industry. I know most of the episodes have had a negative connotation to them lately based on what's going on in the industry. And it is kind of sad, but at the end of the day, it is still growing. There is still people being successful, and there are people that are building great businesses. So here today to change my late Eeyore attitude on the industry, please welcome Paul Weiss, CEO of Paper Planes Extracts. Paul, thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Todd. Great to be here.
Absolutely. So you told me before we started recording that it is not all doom and gloom, and we'll get to that. But I'm excited to talk to you. I'm excited to learn more about the business. You shared some news with me as well too that I don't know if you can share it on here or not, but if you can, we'll talk about it. That's really exciting. But tell me a little bit about Paper Planes and how you got involved there. You know, what you guys are doing out in California.
Sure. Well, first, I'm a big fan of the show. In prepping for the show, I got to re-review a lot of episodes, and it was actually it was pretty exciting to do that. I felt a little bit insecure. Some of your guests seem a whole lot smarter and more savvy than me, so I hope I can hold up. I'll do my best. With regards to our company, we're an extracts company in California. We make infused products. We're a legacy brand. The Paper Planes brand's about 12 years old and came out of the gray market into the white market. And then when the state went recreational, our founder, Carter Latimer, who's really one of the really foundational people in extraction and understanding the plant and so forth, decided to sort of pull back on the brand as California struggled with their integration into the rec market. Realizing that he needed to be better capitalized, he needed to have a more structured approach, which, by the way, I can't say enough for a legacy guy to understand very clearly that if he's going to be successful, he needed to have governance, he needed to have capital, he needed to be very intentional in how he grew his business. He waited. He had some liquidity. He was able to pull back and wait and keep his brand very, very lightly in the market while still winning awards and producing quality product. And we met about 3.5 years ago. And I came out of financial services. I'd spent several years just investing. And then I was looking for an opportunity in the industry for a lot of different reasons. I felt it's like most people, it's got a huge amount of upside potential. Challenges are great. It's a nascent industry that has all kinds of opportunities. So I knew that I needed to marry my skill set with somebody else that understands the cannabis space intimately. I know what I didn't know. And actually Carter knew what he didn't know. And we tell a lot of people, it's like you got chocolate in my peanut butter issue. Very much like that. We spent a year getting to know each other. As you know, Todd, in this industry, trust is the coin of the realm. And
Yes,
it takes a long time for guys to trust you, particularly if you're showing up as a potential Chad, and I'm not, but, it took time. We finally were able to find a facility that we could buy 2 years ago, which we did 2.5 years ago, which was an extract type 7 lab. And within 6 months in July, actually 2 years of last month, we re-entered the market in the Cali market, and now we're comfortably in the top 10 of the concentrates brands, number one in shatter. We have a healthy business of both our branded products, which include vape carts and all kinds of dabbable products, and some other innovative products that we've just brought to market through other acquisitions. So we've grown our brand up very, very quickly. It's been a really incredible 2.5 years together, because it's been when the industry sort of was rolling over into a very different realm. And we've been able to find our way to grow fairly predictably, to get ourselves to profitability just very recently on a consistent basis, and do a lot of things that really run counter to a lot of the experiences that a lot of other companies have had.
You know, I love you. I'm trying to write down some notes based on what you're saying. I love what you're talking about as far as the mix between you and he, right? Because I think that's needed. And like you said, being a legacy brand and understanding what he was going to need to succeed in this new legal market, you know, not a lot of people have been able to make that transition. And some of the people who have made those transitions, listen, all they do is bitch and moan about how hard it is. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, like, a lot of things are easy if you don't follow the rules. And I'm not saying that those people are bad or anything wrong with them, but all of a sudden you have a way that you don't have to look over your shoulder anymore. At least evaluate how you can take advantage of it, you know, in any business, in any industry. And for some reason, cannabis, we think we're unique. The founders are typically a mix of people who focus on different things very, very well. You know, you look at some of the great companies throughout our history, even something like Microsoft, like Bill Gates, although being the CEO, he focused on what he did well and built and brought in people to do the things he didn't do well. Steve Jobs, you know, you look at Gates and Paul Allen, you look at Jobs and Wozniak, you had a business guy and you had a tech guy, and they worked well together and they did their thing. All of a sudden we get to cannabis, and, you know, you have the Jobses of the world, the corporate guys that look at it and say, I can do that without them. I don't need them. It's just weed. It sells itself. There's a market for it. And then you have the legacy guys who say, I don't need these sharks that are trying to take my business. I can do it with them. I've been selling weed forever, when realistically it should have been a match made in heaven. Now, obviously, there are bad people on both sides of that equation, but I'm glad that too, and not putting either of you in either category, but you know, you have a very good focus on business and growth and expansion and structure, and your co-founder understands the plant and what it can do and what people like about it, and is intimate in that area of knowledge. To me, that's a perfect marriage of a founding team or a management team that I can see being successful. So why are you two being able to actually make this model work when, you know, we look at least what the media tells us about the cannabis industry, and that's one of the biggest rivalries we see is between business and the plant?
Well, I completely identify with everything you just said, but I'll take it a step further. Firstly, we don't shy away from those two buckets. We run to them. I'm the business side. Carter is all things cannabis. We don't get in each other's lanes. I mean, you know, he may value some opinions, which I'm very, you know, judicious about when I give them out on the cannabis side. And I think the same thing goes on the financial side. But going into running a business, there's so much that we don't know. And if you can get that advice from someone that you trust that has skin in the game, it's an enormous thing.
Yeah.
So this issue of corporate governance layered into legacy coolness of what the industry really is the secret sauce. It really is. And, you know, we both have equity in the business. We both work 25 hours a day, 8 days a week. We're really into it. This is going to do very good things for us if it succeeds. So we really don't care about glory and, you know, gold stars on our paper. We really are looking for the business to succeed. We start our management meetings, you know, every Monday with, okay, you know, what are the biggest headaches we want to talk about? No one needs to talk about victory laps, and how can we solve them? And generally, I'll start by saying, here's my biggest disappointment that I haven't done, and reach out for help. So it's a very, very giving culture. We have a very tight management team for that. There's one additional category that I would add to what you shared, Todd, which is that there's pressure from out-of-step legacy people. There's pressure from out-of-step funders and business people. But there's also terrible pressures from investors, even once you get a company up and structured. And managing that group, balancing the needs and desires of investor expectations against the realities of the business, both from a cannabis side and a financial side, you get sort of a triangle of synergy. And that all has to come together if you're going to have a successful smaller company, and I would probably say larger company as well.
Yeah. I'm curious to think, and I want to get into the capital sources and fundraising and all that fun stuff that we were talking about. But, one of the last major industries that this country saw before this quote unquote green rush, and funny enough, came out of Northern California as well too, was really the tech boom. And not so much the tech boom, but the .com boom, where you had all of these, for lack of a better term, cloud-based systems, because Facebook and all the social media and everything else is essentially a cloud-based system for those of you who don't understand. So you had all these systems like an Uber, who just recently, turned a profit for the first time. And I don't know if they found some change on the floor and they say that's a profit, but, that were able to just hyper scale with money, knowing that at some point in time they would just they would have this user base, and then they can turn on monetization and they would instantly be cash flow positive or profitable. Whereas now you have this CPG focused business that we haven't seen I'll call it blue collar industry emerge in this country in quite some time. An industry that includes farming, that includes transportation and logistics, that includes retail, that you don't need a specialized degree for. Do you believe that a lot of the investors that were looking to make the generational wealth out of cannabis, because they maybe missed out on tech or are trying to repeat that, tried to apply a lot of the same expectations of a technology company to a cannabis company? Because to me, it seems like so many companies tried to scale up so freaking fast, gain quote unquote market share, then figure out profitability later. And that was essentially their downfall from taking on too much money.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. And I would say that the first thing that the market has really made a mistake on is that there's certainly a less than perfect understanding about how money is going to be made in cannabis. And what does that mean? I was having a pretty interesting conversation with an institutional investor in our space, and one of the larger MSOs, not even an MSO, but it's one of the larger companies, is stubbing their toe. And I said, that I really wasn't that impressed with their model in general. And the comment back was, yeah, but they built quite a bit of things. They have a lot going on. I said, yeah, give me $97 million. I'll build you a lot also. Doesn't mean that it's going to be functional. And, we've capitalized well under $10 million to have what we have. And it's, you have a push of institutional investors that came at this with either a private equity psychology, a lot of them with a private equity psychology, that didn't understand the difficulties, the finickiness of the cannabis environment. And you can't push money into the pipe and get margins and have a 3-year DCF and try to understand a 5-year DCF and have these predictive models that are going to work. It just isn't that way. And although we have, call it a $5 billion market here in California, which is a whole lot of revenues. You're talking about $400 million plus a month now. To peel into that systematically is highly difficult and technical, and it does change almost on a quarterly basis. So I think investor expectations were very much out of step. But what I do want to say to balance that is that take a company like ours. We came at this with really basically zero revenues 2 years ago, and now we have a healthy revenue stream. You can take a company valued more of a venture evaluation, a 5 million, 8 million, 15 or 20 million, anything like that, and easily get a 5 to 10x out of that over time and have the same types of big returns. What you can't do, I don't think, is have a hugely inflated market cap based on a ton of capital raised and unrealistic expectations. Yeah. So there are the big returns, and I do believe they're happening, and they will happen. It just depends how you enter the market and how you approach it. And that's a very big distinction between saying, oh, the MSOs aren't going to work, so this is not going to work. It maybe mean you can't deploy $100 million of your fund into an idea, but you can certainly deploy 500,000, a million, 3 million, and make big returns at that level.
Yeah.
And that's where I think the opportunity is, Todd.
I think there's a lot of opportunities there too. I think a couple of years ago, I remember saying that, when cannabis comes to normalize, or it's no longer a startup industry anymore, are we going to see the names that we see today, or will there be this second coming of these tier 2 and 3 MSOs, folks that started in a singular state like Colorado or California or Oregon or whatever it is, and spread their net there and then bootstrap that, or maybe raised a little bit of capital to go to another state, and then they focus on that state really well. And instead of opening up 10 states at once and running around with your hair on fire, are these going to be the MSOs of the future because they were able to bootstrap and they just don't have millions upon millions of dollars of debt on their books, or tons of investors that they have to appease? Because at the end of the day, like a public startup sounds like I won't curse, but it sounds like a nightmare. It sounds horrible because you're trying to make these drastic decisions to make sure that your business is healthy, but you have a whole bunch of people that you have to get approved from, essentially, right? So I see that being an issue at the industry. The other thing I think that kind of hindered the growth of the industry early on too was people's hesitancy to invest in plant touching ventures at first, right? I remember 2017, 2018, which was no means the beginning, but certainly, not late in the game. Many of the funds that I would talk to were only investing in ancillary companies at that point because they were afraid to invest in the plant touching companies. And, there's always that old adage that people say the gold miners aren't the ones who got rich. The people who sold the picks and shovels got rich. Well, I agree with that, except for the fact that if the gold miners don't show up, nobody's selling any picks and shovels, right? Or if the gold miners don't have the money to go mine the gold, they ain't buying the picks and shovels. So all the money seemed to have gone, or a lot of money, early money seemed to go into the picks and shovels. And the gold miners were kind of stuck figuring out, okay, how do we do this without the capital? Because it's going to all these service providers. And now we're at a point where the service providers grew so big, they have investors, and they're having a hard time growing any bigger because either people don't have money to pay them, or they just have such a significant market share that they can't grow.
Well, and eventually picks and shovels changed the design, and you could no longer sell the same picks and shovels. And, that's very typical in cannabis, that it's a technology in a sense. I don't want to say technology, because that really takes you away from the plant, but you get such changes in consumer preferences. So let me speak to a few things there, if I could.
Sure.
One of the themes that I've heard coming out of some of the past podcasts that you've done is that, well, equity's gone and, everyone's doing debt, and debt. And I just, if I could say anything to the market that would have any value, debt is going to kill your company in this industry. And it's only being offered because that's what people that can originate it sell. That's all they have to sell you right now. And, they talk about the wall of debt in real estate. There's a wall of debt in cannabis. And this is an industry for permanent capital. And if you do your growth with debt and you have a debt schedule every 6 months or a year, that's this big thing happening, you may have real struggles. So, if anybody wants to talk to me about that, I'd be glad to, because I don't want to evangelize about it, but this is a permanent capital environment. The real value, I don't really think, is in the picks and shovels as much as it is in brands. Brands was why I got into this. I was very lucky to meet Carter. I was very blessed to be really now the CEO of a company that is the coolest brand, the best products in the market. And we're succeeding in large part because of that. Of course, governance and capital structure and efficiencies are critical. That's for sure. But without having a great product at a price that is very much below everyone else's, or at least competitively priced, you're not going to have anything in terms of value in this business. Yeah, I guess that would be my reactions to sort of those several topics that you brought up on the last question.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is interesting, right? Where the capital had gone, and it just, I don't know. I know investors are smart and savvy and everything else, but I just look at the way that this industry was capitalized, and I feel like there wasn't an adult in the room in some of these conversations, right? Like we forgot about everybody saw what the potential upside was because it was weed, and weed had been sold forever. And of course, there's a built-in market for it, and all that great stuff. But it feels like people were just throwing money left and right, and they forgot basic business principles, and they forgot what a good company looked like and what a good management team looked like. Like, I don't know if we just got them high on our supply and tried to trick them, but it just doesn't seem like it was allocated the way that some of these other industries were. Or maybe I just like to feel that adults are the ones that invest and every other industry went the right way. It could be a bunch of people just gambling with a lot of money at that point. But
I'm not part of the insider club yet. Maybe I will be because the company is growing and I'm doing more things like this. But I have not been overly impressed with a lot of the senior management teams that I've met. And I suppose if I was part of that club, that would be probably my last time I'm invited to a dinner. But it's just what I've seen. I've seen out of step principles in terms of managing your expenses, managing your inventory, managing your new product rollout, finding the balance between your CapEx expenses and rainy day funding and all those types of things. And I mean, you have some really great companies out there, but a lot of the big ones that are suffering now are probably going to be sold off in pieces, and we'll buy some of those pieces. And that's kind of how we've had 3 acquisitions in the last 2 years. Very small, very targeted, all accretive, not owning a piece of real estate for exposure in the industry, but this will make us money within 30 days, and we buy those types of things.
Does that make it easier for you guys at this point to expand the business where you can find, maybe another extraction company or something that fits or complements your business that you see the value in, but maybe they were undercapitalized or someone at the top made a bad decision that put them in a bad spot, where you can pick up good quality processors, decent equipment, another great location versus having to build it from scratch every time? Do you think that kind of gives you a little bit of an advantage because you guys are on the healthier side? And I see, it's not all bad when it comes to an acquisition, folks. Like, if there is a business that's struggling and it might go under, if another company acquires it and gives these people jobs and a future and a hope, like, to me, that's a great thing. It's not a bad thing at all.
It's usually pretty bad. This is just being candid. I mean, I hear that, but when you buy a company in distress, they've had a year of pain and insecurity, a lot of damaged people. Most of the people have, been laid off already or are suffering. And then we'll come in and, basically sort of do our thing to it. So yeah, I don't want to come in like a white knight particularly. Who it helps is usually the investors, because they go from a total wipeout to having a chance to make their money back.
Yeah.
And that's really what, a distress acquisition, which is what they are now. We just closed our 3rd acquisition in June, buying farms. And that's really where we see a lot of opportunity, because we have a great lab that can do a ton of volume. So we're good for that. And we've been, by the way, you mentioned equipment. That's such a great comment, Todd, because, for me to save $4,000 on something, that really is a good thing. I mean, numbers matter to me. And, we're getting equipment, we're getting things that, are saving money everywhere. But where we're seeing the best opportunity came out of a lot of difficult times where, 80% of the licenses weren't renewed in like Humboldt County alone. Yeah. We have our farms in Grass Valley, and we were able to really put together something out of, a lot of crisis. And for us, what that does is it gives us the opportunity to either sell bulk into the market, which with all of our relationships at high prices, or channel that as maybe fresh frozen into our extracted products. We get to use the smalls and the trim, so we can use the end product and not have to buy from the market to push it into shatter, maybe make cured carts, all the different things we can do with plant to lower our cost or monetize. So we have an ecosystem that we're building that gives us a chance to, whether flower is high or low, to make money. And that's the key, the optionality. So we see the best opportunities for us accumulating perhaps some more square footage in cultivation. We have light depth, and we're eager to look at those opportunities maybe in the fall. Other things, highly selective. It's, of our three acquisitions, two, we bought companies, one was an asset purchase, and we're just very, very careful that whatever we do has to work for us very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And I think that's the discipline that we're keeping. So I don't want to make it sound like a macro theme, but on a micro basis, yeah, there's things that are cheap out there. And if something's very cheap, we're going to go for it.
Yeah, man. I mean, to me, I do think it makes it easier to expand just because, you get to start from chapter 5 instead of chapter 1 in the build out and everything else. One of the things that I think that has led to your success between you and your team there is knowing who your customer is. And, we go back, you say, you were talking about earlier that you see the value in brands, and I couldn't agree with you more. And in fact, 2 years ago on this show, every single investor that came on this show talked about how brands are the future of cannabis, and that's where they're looking, and that's where they want to allocate money. I can tell you from personal experience that I co-founded a fucking brand 4 months after those conversations, and they're all liars. Every single last one of them. They didn't put a damn dollar into a single brand. So, or at least into a good one for that matter. And I will call each and every single one of you out. Um, you know,
but you forgot all about that, right?
yeah. No, I'm not taking it personally whatsoever. But having said that, one of the things that I noticed when my time at Spring Big, right, is essentially my main job was to sell text messaging marketing. I was selling a platform, but one of the things that I realized is the majority of cannabis brands out there didn't know who their customer was and did not know how to speak to them. So what we would have is people sending pictures of nugs or sending pictures of cartridges or pre-rolls, the same images, even though maybe their nug was a little bit frostier than the next guy with their logo on it. And that's what they were using to advertise. And I'm like, nobody's going to pay attention to that. You need to know who your customer is and you need to know how to speak to them. My old colleague Eric said that of Burner at Cookies, that's what Burner did so well. He knew who his customer was and he knew how to speak to them. I've seen Carter on interviews talk about the fact that he thinks about what somebody is going to pay for a product to use it every day. He wants, and I won't say Budweiser because they have controversy. We'll go with Coca-Cola for now. Would rather be more of the Coca-Cola and sell hundreds of thousands of units than a handful, right? Like, we all know those great companies. Like, I guarantee you there's nobody, at least the people I've interviewed, maybe some of the big MSO heads, that are drinking Pappy as their daily driver, right? Pappy Van Winkle or having, Clase Azul in their margaritas. It's just not happening. So, where I see you guys fitting in is knowing that you want to be a great product for an affordable price that people are going to go in, they're going to buy it every day, and they're going to stock up on it. And those are always going to be the winners in any industry, are going to be the daily drivers because that's what people buy the most of, right? Budweiser, Miller, Coors. Are they the best beers, the best beer you ever had in your life? Absolutely not. Are people going to be mad at you if you show up with it, or are they going to be happy? For sure they are, right? And they sell more, and you go into any store in the country, those are the three brands that are front and center anywhere else. And to me, I think that's a category that you guys fit in, is a everyday premium brand. And to me, it seems like you guys understand your customer, which is probably why you're in the situation that you're in now.
I couldn't have said it any better. Thank you for that. And you've definitely captured what we're all about. I cannot say enough about my partner, Carter. He truly gets it. He gets consumers. He's a master at the manufacturing process. He knows the plant intimately, grown up in Grass Valley. So he really lives everything that you just said. I've often said I'm basically his offensive line and he's the quarterback, and that's the relationship we have. I like that relationship. I just basically butt heads and plow forward while he he beautifully threads passes up the sidelines. And that has really worked for us. So yeah, I think that the value proposition for premium brands managed properly, with messaging properly, carefully threaded the needle there, is where we're going to make our money and how we're going to grow.
That's awesome, man. And I think that's great. I think a lot more that's the problem with a lot of these manufactured larger brands is, I don't know if you just have a group of a focus group or something, and they come up with a cool name and a logo, and then they feed it to every single one of their retail stores and try to shove it down our throat. And it's like, there's no connection with this particular brand. I can tell you a lot of the brands that I like out in, so for more recently, Alien Labs. I'm a big Alien Labs fan. I just got to sit down with Ted Lighty, and Alien Labs to me was a very popular cannabis or California cannabis brand. And at first, I'm one of those contrarians where I'm like, well, everybody loves it. I'm not going to spend my money on it. Like, I'm just going to be standoffish. But then I started understanding like that Ted named it Alien Labs because, he felt like he didn't fit in. And then actually, the more and more I looked into Ted and understood his story, I fell in love with the brand. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is phenomenal weed. And I told Ted when he came on the show, I'm like, I liked your brand prior. I love it more now that I actually have spoken to you. And, when Carter, Ted, Caleb, even yourself, seeing the folks that are running these brands out in the public, I think that's what everybody wants to see. And that's what's going to give you guys success. And I feel like the PR machine of cannabis, and maybe I'm guilty of this too, we were so focused on the MSOs and all the big names, maybe because some of us were trying to sell some advertising, that you guys didn't get the proper platform that you deserved. And I'm glad, I'm definitely trying to be a platform for companies like yours now. And I hope to see more of it in the future. Seeing you work with the PR team that you're working with, that I'm friends with, to me, I think is going to be, that's where I hope the future of the industry grows. Because one of the things that I love doing is talking about weed and talking about the industry and talking about the plant itself, not to the people in the industry. I get to do that all the time, but to all the people who follow me on LinkedIn from my technology days, the people who followed me from my venture capital days, the people who, where I was friends with in high school that see it on Facebook. That's what I'm doing the show for, is the people who I want to educate about the industry. Because the average person, and I'm taking this completely off topic out here, believes that the cannabis industry is booming and we're all jumping into money pits like Scrooge McDuck.
Yeah, we're not.
I didn't get my pay yet.
Yeah, the MSOs have made our life very difficult. The mistakes that they've made, I mean, you look at the ETFs down 95% because they're basically exposed to large companies that should never have gone public, and have basically created an optic that makes it very difficult for us to convince investors that put money to work here in the industry. So you have to take a very different approach, which we've taken. Something that I wanted to mention, you talked about Ted at Alien Labs, and by the way, it was a great interview you did with him.
Thank you.
And yeah, it
that
was
was
really
all him.
And I tell you what came across. First, how much like Carter he reminds me. He's humble, he's authentic, and he's extremely practical. And those things really imbue themselves into the brand, into the way they run their company. We have a great relationship. I don't have a relationship directly with Ted, but Carter for many years does. And in many ways, models a lot about what we're doing with what he's done, because he doesn't see himself as big, doesn't see himself as an important person in the industry as much as a vital person into an industry he loves. So yeah, totally. But going back to the MSOs and what they've done, they've really damaged our ability with their struggles to work with larger counterparties, to get proper professional coverage. One of the most important things that we did when we got ourselves back into the market several years ago was to make sure we worked with the best accountants, the best lawyers, all the things that corporate governance would require if you're actually going to raise capital and if you're actually going to run a proper company. And I have to tell you, I mean, it was one of the hardest experiences, months, to get the best in breed professional counterparties to work with us, because the stain of non-performance, over expectations, and deflated valuations was all over the place. So as our charts going lower left to upper right, and their charts are going upper left to lower right, we're making the case that we're doing well, but we're kind of stained by an overall problem. Now that we're kind of breaking out into a different zone, it's getting a little bit easier. But I have a lot of compassion for companies that are trying to get to the point that we're just getting to, which is, like the turtle coming out of the sand and racing to the edge of the sea. It's so hard to get there before you can start to swim. The terrain's been made harder for quality companies that are not having the experience the MSOs had.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. And it's, guys like Carter, guys like Ted, and the others I've mentioned before, you get a different sense of the industry and the pride and just really them being happy to be there than you do with any of the corporate entities. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm sure they're going out and hiring good people, but they're trying, I'm sure salary and bottom line is in mind there when they're picking people. They're either overpaying or underpaying because they're trying to save money. You talk to a guy like Carter, guys like Ted. One of the things I got out of my conversation with Ted, and then it hasn't been released yet, I interviewed David Polly from Preferred. When you talk to those guys, one thing that both of them said that strikes it with me is, I can't believe that I just get to do this full time for a living and not have to look over my shoulder. Like, they're just so happy to be doing what they love to do every day. And they're truly artists in that sense. Like, you look at music, you look at anybody who's a performer, comedians, and the best ones, it was never their intention to be the biggest in the world. It was their intention to just be able to do that for a living and not have to work another job. And if that's where they got, they'd be happy. And because all they ever cared about was performing, they made it further than anybody else because they cared about the performance. It wasn't the business. It wasn't the fame. It wasn't the autographs. And guys like Carter and Ted and Caleb and David and, Doja and Brett and all the guys that come from Sacramento, mostly, the fact that they get to grow weed every day for a living, that they get to put their art out into the world and they have fans and people are paying for it. Those guys are always going to be appreciative of that. And I think that's where the best of this industry comes from. It's not a factory farm. These are not tomatoes, right? Like, you can go to the store and you can buy tomatoes, or you can go to a local farmer's market and buy tomatoes from a quote unquote artist. And I think that's where this particular product needs to come from. So that's why I love seeing them get the platform finally, because the stories they have and the emotions that they have, and just the fact that they're so happy to be here, that is what I believe the world needs to see about the cannabis space.
Yeah. And to build on that comment, they actually bring a lot to the corporate side that are things that are maybe less obvious. One of the greatest skills that group of people that either came out of black market, and it's pretty much all black market, and then, developed into the white market and rotated, was that they know how to measure risk. They understand the principle of risk, and that could be risk from a legal perspective and then risk from a capital perspective, because these are pretty much all guys that put their own dollars into whatever they were doing originally. And if it worked, it was great. And if it didn't, they were busted in terms of financially. And those guys that saw the path that might have been harder to come out of black market into white market and to go ahead and start to take the short-term pain of investing illiquidity, dealing with investors and dealing with governance, and then rotate into it. They bring a lot to the corporate environment by understanding that you don't overinflate inventory, you don't take stupid risks with your capital, because they came out of it from a very personal perspective. Some of the larger companies that didn't have the legacy guys that understood that risk component came into it with a much more free spending situation, and cannabis forgives very little.
Yeah.
You can be sitting with $400,000 of bad inventory because suddenly nobody wanted to buy half-gram carts. They want full-gram carts, which we went through a year and a half ago, and just happened. And we did not overstock that, but a lot of companies did. That's just one of many examples. And when you're a company growing, you can't make those types of mistakes too often. And the guys that are successful, the people that are successful, are the ones that manage that investment risk, their capital risk, because they're accustomed to taking that out of their own wallet. And that translates really well to this world.
Yeah.
When you find that.
It's incredible to see what companies like yours have done. And I think this is the second coming of the cannabis industry, and the one without the bubble, hopefully. I'm excited to see it. But on that note, you can't keep all your goodies in California forever. That's not fair to the rest of us and the rest of the country. There's 49 other states that probably want your product, only some of those being legal. You guys have done a great job in California. What is the future look like for you? Are there other markets that you plan on going into? Do you plan on being a multi-state brand? How do you plan on attacking that as well?
Well, we have our first deal that we've signed. I think I could mention it. We're just not in the market yet for logistical reasons
You
with the
probably
flower.
another 2 weeks before this is released in case they need a buffer zone.
We have to edit that out. No, I think
Yeah.
I'm okay. But we have a licensing deal with the Flowery.
Beautiful.
I know you've spoken about them on other shows and you've done a show from them, from their facility. I have to say that they've really put it together from getting, best in breed from preferred and 710 and all the rest. They've created an environment that Carter wanted to be a part of. We didn't care if we made money or didn't. We wanted to be part of that group. And
Yeah.
we inked the deal. We're having a little issue with, our packaging, like everybody does in Florida. It has to be so generic that nobody
You
wants to
probably
buy
can't
it.
have that plane on there.
Yeah, and what's ironic is our packages are black anyway, so we were good, but we're working on it. But we love those guys. We've had a couple of other opportunities that we decided not to pursue from a licensing perspective. And as you know, licensing is not a big expense. It's basically almost minimal. You're basically getting a royalty fee. So you can do that. But culturally speaking, we're really trying to be with the right group. Now, that may sound very limiting because why not go with the wrong group? Let them sell your product. And then we don't want to lose control of quality.
Yeah.
Each of these vertically integrated operators have very specific SOPs, and some are just basically, auto flower, let's just make it and make whatever we can, and because they have an artificially inflated price market because of restrictions or some other reason. We're just being really careful about that. And obviously, what the flower has done is some great things for quality, as you well know. But that's the first comment I wanted to make on expanding. The second comment is we're very careful with our capital and spreading ourselves thin. It's sort of the Machiavellian concept of principalities. We don't want to be in places that we can't see, control, or have a reach to at some level. And we think that we can give our investors a huge return and make a lot of value here in Cali without having to do that. We're going to do it really very selectively. The flowery was easy because we wanted to get closer to those guys.
Yeah.
For a lot of reasons, and most of them are Cali guys, as you know, or at least some of them are Cali guys. So going forward, opportunistically, if we see a group we want to be part of that doesn't require a lot of cash investment, that risk capital, we'll definitely do it. But we watch every dollar. We're knife fighters, man. We watch every dollar, every day's, careful on what we do with our liquidity. And we also don't want to dilute what it is that we've made in the brand. We don't want to have something in a box that has our name on it that doesn't, taste as terpy and great as our products always do.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I'm excited for you guys to come down to Florida. Did you get a chance to go down to the facility there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We've been there multiple times. Carter actually was there when they were getting their BHO room under control and worked with their extraction team. And when it was just a few months ago when they started getting that going, just got it approved and shared our SOPs. And we're really looking forward to working closely with them to bring great BHO product to the Florida market.
Did they take you to the taco truck at the gas station?
They did take us to the taco truck.
It's good tacos.
Still recovering.
Yeah. No, I've eaten that. So yeah, that's stories I can tell you offline. But yeah, man, the taco truck is great. The facility is incredible. Actually, the interview we did with David Pauly from Preferred, we did from the hallway outside the grow facility or the grow rooms because he wanted to show off how massive that facility was. But
it's incredible what they built. It's
great
incredible.
team of people. Donovan Garrison is one of my favorite people in the world. He is, to me, one of the funniest people I've ever met without intentionally trying to be funny. So, listen, man, it's been great talking to you, learning more about the brand, seeing your views on the industry. We talked about your future, how you expand. Is there anything else any other knowledge you'd want to leave us with before I let you go?
The only thing I would share is that, people that want to either invest in this industry or want to be part of it as an operator, like I am, it's a lot of fun. It's a very cool place. You meet some really cool people, but it's a block and tackle day-to-day grind. And it's a business, even though it's a cool business and a fun business, it's a tough business. And you have to come into it with a lot of skills, with a great team. Otherwise, you're probably going to fail. And That's the nature of most businesses. But I would say that cannabis, throughout all my experiences, maybe the most discriminatory on only letting very good, well-structured companies succeed now. Very important that way. And that would be the only thing I'd want to share with, whoever's ever listening, is understand what this industry is and what it isn't.
Agreed. And I would add on that, if you're going to look at a brand and want to invest in it, make sure they know who they're selling to and how to speak to them, because you'd be surprised how much that doesn't exist. Paul, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate you joining me.
Thanks, Todd. It was a great pleasure. Love the show, and keep it up. Thank you.
Any social media or websites anyone you want to promote?
Just paperplanes.extracts on Instagram, and website coming soon. And go out and buy our products, everybody, please. Thank you.
Look at it. Everybody watching in Florida, look for it. The Flowery. Remember, they deliver. They got 6 stores around the country. We might be coming to you live from the Tampa dispensary soon. St. Petersburg, Clearwater. Actually, the Tampa area, but Clearwater dispensary. So, folks, this has been another episode of Elevate Your Grind. It was a great one. I hope you enjoyed it. If at any point you missed part of this episode, you'd like to catch up on it, you can check it out at youtube.com/elevate your grind, or on any of your audio podcast platforms such as Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. For all things C-Lab, check out joinclab.com. Folks, it's been another episode of Elevate Your Grind. We're out.